Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Great Big Plugin Show on Puremix. This is a review show where we do plugin reviews, but we do them in a live stream so that you guys can chime in the chat that is over here somewhere. There we go. And you can be a part of the show. So if you have something that you want to see me do with the plugin, make sure you let me know over in the comments there, and hopefully I'll see them and we can get to it. Today we are looking at the Overstayer MAS plugin from Softube. It's pretty freaking awesome, I have to say, and I'm excited to get to it. Before we do that, quick update. We have a new video coming out on Friday on Puremix.com. It's the history of the Beatles recording techniques, era number 2. So if you've been following along and you've seen era 1 already, era 2 is coming out on Friday, and we have 2 more eras to go after that. So there's 4 eras covering all different years of the Beatles' very long 8-year career, but so many records were done inside of that, and we split it up into 4 eras. Era number 2 coming out Friday. That's going to be both the recording and the mixing technique, so be sure to check that out. And I want to say thanks to everybody who tuned in on Friday for our live stream with Michael Brower. That was a blast. We were on for 3.5 hours. Michael answered every question that we could possibly get to. I think we got to like over 30 something questions, which is a lot for a Q&A. And he was extremely in-depth, very open about so many of his techniques, both with the Browerized template and with the rest of his career. So if you haven't seen that yet, it's available on YouTube, and it'll be available on the site under the Browerized video very soon. So keep an eye out for that, or go watch it, after we do this video. And as always, make sure that you guys like and subscribe to help us keep content like this going. It really does help. Just hit the little thumbs up button and ring the bell for all the notifications and all that. There's the typical YouTube stuff. So really does make a difference though. But let's dive in. So the Overstayer MAS plugin is based on this unit from Overstayer. This is an analog saturation box that was immensely popular in the whole community when it came out, and remains a staple in a lot of people's racks today. Both mixing and mastering people that I know use this unit. And basically it's turn it up and saturate it. There you go. See you next time. No, just kidding. We're going to have some fun, though. There's a lot of options on this box that make it pretty versatile. And Softube has done some things in the plugin version that weren't really possible in the analog version, which we're going to get to. So here is the Softube site. We're not going to stay on here for very long, but I just want to show you guys there's 2 versions of the plugin. There's the regular classic version and then an extended version, and that's where some of the craziness is going to happen. We're going to go through and do some different sound examples today. I've got an awesome track that Vance Powell recorded from the band Illiterate Light called Sweet Beast. And if you guys want to see how that's made, there's a start to finish series on Puremix where you can watch everything from them talking about how they're going to do the song, the pre-production, all the way up to the final mix. So definitely check that out. So Overstayer MAS, just going down here, it's the usual website stuff. It's amazing. There's a bunch of quotes and all that. You can listen to some demos, but we're going to do that here. There's 6 different emphasis modes, all of that. We'll talk about it, markety stuff. But one interesting thing is if you have amp room or modular from Softube, both of those plugins have little modules of the MAS that you can insert into it. Other than that, you can check out the site. I believe there's a trial and all that jazz. It looks like it's on sale right now. Yada, yada. Let's go to Pro Tools and hear the thing. So here we go. Let's go over there. All right. So I've got my track from Illiterate Light pulled up, and I've got some different aux groups that we're going to try this on. We're going to start out with the regular Overstayer version on the drum bus. And then we'll eventually try it out on guitars and on the mix bus, and then on anything else that you guys want to try it out on. So let me pull it up here. This is the classic version of the plugin. So we'll do a little deep dive on the features. Over on the left at the top here, we have a high shelf button, low shelf button, and low cut button. All of these are pre-saturation, so this comes first in the signal chain, and they'll feed the distortion circuit and make it react in different ways, which is really fun. Then we've got input-output knobs, a mix knob in the middle. You can imagine what that does. Below the mix knob, we have a 2 dry button. This allows you to basically alter how much of the dry signal and wet signal are being blended together. It's a gain staging thing. There's an auto compensation button. When this is on, as you turn up the input, the output goes down. Even though you don't see the output knob go down, it's definitely doing that. And then over on the right, we've got the classic modes that were on the hardware unit, the basically dual harmonic stage, a second order harmonic stage, and an emphasis stage. When emphasis is engaged, it's behaving like the classic unit did. And when I turn that on, you'll see on the bottom here, classic MAS is enabled. Then to the right of that, we've got 5 new modes that Softube added to the plugin version that weren't available in the hardware. So if you wanted to use this in the most true way, true to form of the analog hardware, emphasis classic MAS is the way. The extended version has more stuff, which we'll get to. Also, with Softube plugins, they have these extendable panels. And if I bring those out, you can see what's going on. Input-output metering. On the bottom, there's a headroom slider, which is very useful on this plugin. It likes to get a lot of levels, so you can adjust the headroom and kind of make up for that if you need to go further. There's a high pass on here. This happens post the plugin. So this is a high pass on the output stage. And then there's a phase invert, which allows you to roll around where the corner of the phase flip is. Sort of to be used like a Little Labs IBP, where you can kind of dial in phase if you're noticing things as you play with the mix knob. We're not going to worry about that today, though. And let's see. Let's just go in and check some things out. One thing I thought would be cool is if before we dive into the audio example, we actually take a look at this thing on the EQ curve and analyzer from Bertum Audio. We did a show on this. It was the last episode of the show. And basically how this thing works, if you didn't see that, is you instantiate an instance of the plugin at the beginning of the chain, you insert your plugin in the middle, and then you put another instance on the end, and it kind of shows you an EQ curve of what's happening. Very similar to Plugin Doctor with a lot less information, so there's no harmonic information on this one. You can read phased response, but it crashes my system, so we're not going to do that today. However, while harmonic information would be useful for a distortion plugin like this, I don't really like to go that far with it, because I think like it's nice to get an idea of what's going on inside of the box with an analyzer. That's cool. But as soon as you start going into overanalyzing things, I think like you're forgetting about making music. So this is a personal thing. I'm just kind of going off on it, but I don't know. And I don't usually look for that much information. I like to just kind of get to the music. But all right, so we're going to do this quickly. Here is the original regular instance of the plugin and my analyzer. So I'm going to come out of bypass on here. And as soon as I do, you notice we get a little bit of a gain bump and some curvy stuff at the top. Let's engage the high pass filter first, or as Softube likes to say, the low cut filter. And I wanted to show this because there's a resonant bump on here. This resonance thing is going to make a lot more sense, especially when we get to the extended version. And this is a cool thing to be aware of. When you engage the low cut, you're not just shaving off low end going into the circuit, you're actually creating a resonant peak along with that low cut. So that's good to know. And then let's take a look at the low shelf. So that guy's reaching all the way up to about 300 hertz and some change. And then we'll take a look at our high shelf. That guy's reaching all the way down to 1K. Good to know. All right. That's about the importance of this whole thing here. So let's play with these emphasis modes here. So when I kick on emphasis, as we drive the signal, it's going to affect the frequency response of this. So you can see as I start pushing like past 8, now we're getting a little bit of a low shelf going down. And then when we get super cranky, everything just goes nuts, which you can imagine with the distortion plugin, it's going to go pretty nuts. All right, we'll take a look. Second order here. Different curve. All that this is good for is making a little mental note and then moving on with your life and getting back to music. So if everybody has their mental notes, we're going to dig in. We'll take a look real quick at these 5 modes here. So let me take off dual. We just have emphasis on. This is the classic MAS. Here's our low bandwidth. As we push this up, let's see what goes on. There you go. Low shelf. Now, I do know that like when you're this high on input, things are going crazy anyway. Low presence. Low presence meaning not low mids, but this is actually mid presence. So we're looking up around like 2K on that bump. High presence moves it up a little bit further. Let me back down the input a little bit. And then bass distortion and treble distortion. Those are going to be a lot better with some actual audio examples. Before we move on, let's take a look real quick at the extended plugin. So I'm just going to explain the GUI real quick. All of those modes that we saw, the 5 modes on the bottom, they are basically using different variations of the controls that you see in the extended version. You'll notice in this version of the plugin, those 5 modes are not included because all of those dials are available to you. So the high pass filter, for example, if we flip that guy on, we get a little resonant peak, right? This isn't the same resonant peak that we had from our regular guy up at the input stage. So different looking curve. But when we turn this one on, if we crank the resonance up a bit, hopefully you guys are seeing everything all right. Sorry, my analyzer might have been cut off by my camera there. All right, let's move this guy over here. All right, I think you can see now. And then we can obviously move this guy up. I do really, really like the sound of this filter. And we'll play with that, you know, with some audio and everything, but that's a good example of what goes on. The bass circuit in this has a compensation mode on here. And one thing to note is the big knob is going to be the level pushed into the circuit. And then there's this little triangle on the outside of the bass and the treble knobs. That is the output path. So you can basically, while compensation is on, you'll notice that that ring moves to the left whenever I turn the knob to the right. And I could turn off compensation and add more low end at the output stage. And you can see that on the analyzer here. So basically driving the input, and then I can adjust how much low end is actually coming through at the end of that. In the middle, we have 2 presence knobs. Same thing, we have compensation for them. And let me turn the bass back down to 0 here. Let's turn off compensation. We'll make sure our high pass is out here. And we can move our presence guy up and down. So basically these are just bell curves. There's no resonance filter for them. We can just move them around on the graph. And then here's our second guy. Turn that off. Here's our second guy without compensation on. We'll bring up our outer ring. So another bell curve. And then you can decide where you want that on the spectrum. The numbers around the ring are not useful. They are kind of like a Pultec. When you move it up to 1 on a Pultec, it's not really doing 1 dB of boosting. It's doing 1 Pultec of boosting. So we're getting 1 MAS of increase as we move around this thing here. So there's like 5 overstayers right there. All right, so we'll turn that back on. Let's turn these guys down. And then with our treble, we'll turn off compensation. And we can take a look at the curve that's kind of going on there. So it's a little bit higher up. Looks like 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, reaching down to like 1K-ish. And then at the end, we have another filter, a low pass filter with another resonance. All right, that's enough nerdy stuff, guys. Let's get to some music. Here we go. Let me turn these guys off. All right, so I'm going to play just the drum tracks from this mix, and we'll just hear what the dry sounds like. Bypassing the overstayer. Here we go. Okay, so these are some pretty distorted drums already, right? There's a lot of tone built into them. That's how Vance likes to work. One of the things that I love about his drum sound is just how long the kick drum blooms on this one. It has like such a note value to it, and there's a beautiful resonance and all of that. So we've already got a process sounding drum set, which is cool. And it also sounds like a little distortion might make it even cooler. Maybe. It's hard to make things cooler than how Vance tracks them, but we'll see what we can do. All right, so going to take this out of bypass, I'll play a little bit of the dry and then I'll take it out of bypass and we'll listen. So yeah, you can hear some usual artifacts of saturation. It's getting almost a little bit more of a compressed sound. We're hearing a little bit of fluttering on the low end on that beautiful kick drum that he has. Let's play around and let's see what this low cut or high pass filter does on here with that resonant bump that we saw in the analyzer. So dry, and then I'll bring it in. So if you're on a system with some pretty good low end to it, you can hear that that sub range just kind of lifts up, and it also tightens up a hair, and it's just kind of blooming out. And this is just with the default settings on here. Now, one thing I didn't mention on the metering, we have sort of a zoomed in view of the first decibel on here. So it goes from 0.1 to 0.2, 0.3, 0.5, 0.7, and then 1 decibels. After that, we move all the way up to 3, 5, 7, and 10. So really a lot of the important information is happening within inside of that first decibel there. As we go here, I'm just going to play around and we'll take out the low cut and we'll listen to these other two filters by themselves as they're feeding the input stage of the saturation. Okay, I think this section's pretty good to listen to at that one, so focus on the sound of the ride cymbal. I'll start without the high shelf, and then I'll put it in. So it's cool because it's lifting up all that information, obviously, but it's feeding into the saturation. It's kind of doing a little bit of a rounding thing. Let's try pushing up our input more and getting some more saturation out of the unit as a whole. All right, so you can see I've gone all the way up to 10 here and I'm not getting enough input. So I'm opening the bottom panel and I'm going to bring the headroom down so that the thing saturates a little bit sooner. There we go. Let's go a little bit more extreme here. As a reminder, we were here, dry. All right, so we're lighting it up a little bit more. Let's try pushing that that high shelf on again. And I'm going to pop that off and then do the low cut. We'll bring in the low shelf as well. Which all gets a little bit crazy, but it's kind of fun. All right, let's check out the dual and second order buttons here. So starting off, I'm going to leave emphasis in and then we'll turn on dual. Let's take a listen to second. So that's interesting. When second's on, I kind of hear the cymbals go down a little bit. The whole thing feels a little bit more compressed to me, just bringing in that saturation. So I'm going to try bringing on the high shelf along with second order. We'll just go crazy with all the mode buttons. Here's where we started. Okay, so things can get pretty crazy pretty fast, and we have a mix knob to kind of deal with that. One thing we could do is just kind of like find a sound that we like and then bring it back if it's a little too extreme, right? So handy mix knob in the center. Down at the bottom, let's take a listen to some of these different preset modes that Softube has added to the unit. So as I mentioned before, we're on classic MAS. This is the most accurate mode to the hardware, as Softube says. So I'm going to take off our dual and second and just leave the emphasis on. We're listening to classic MAS, and then we're going to play around with going to like low bandwidth, low presence, all of that. Remember, low presence is actually mid-band presence, and then high presence is going to be a step up from that. So low presence being around like 1-2K as we saw in the analyzer. Okay, here we go. So I'll play a couple bars of each mode and you can listen to the effect. Okay, so lots of different options inside of that thing. You can go from absolutely insane. As you move up those different presets, obviously I started adjusting the input because things were just getting pretty nuts. So with all of that being said, let's take a look at the extended version of the plugin. And that's where we get all the extra controls on the bottom that I believe the presets are basically just doing different variations of what's going on inside of that. I played around with this a little bit before the show, and I'll show you a setting I had dialed in. So here's bypassed. Coming out of bypass. So I used it to kind of extend the bottom that I love so much about Vance's drum sounds in general, but especially on this one. He had such a long kick drum, and I wanted to kind of push that a little bit and then see if I could extend it using the plugin. So what I've got going on is the low cut, which has that resonant peak that we saw in the analyzer, the low shelf, which is all of this is pushing into the input of the saturation circuit. And then over on the right, I'm just using the emphasis, and then on the bottom here, I don't have the high pass filter in. I've got the bass circuit turned up to 4, but then I'm using compensation, the output volume of that down to -6. As we saw before too, those are, when we say like -6, that's -6 overstayers or -6 MASs, not necessarily dB. So just kind of tweaking it in by ear. That's one thing you can appreciate about the numbers when they're just kind of arbitrary like that, is like it forces you to just turn it until it sounds right. Don't think about the numbers. Other than, you know, -4 is equivalent to +4 over here. So that's nice that the compensation is being accurate there. But yeah, so remember, this is the big knob is the input to the saturation circuit. The black knob is the filter after the saturation circuit. So it's the output of the unit. So cranking low end into it, turning low end on the way out of it. And then over on the presence knob, I crank that thing up to 10, and then it's down 10. And then on our treble, I'm +6 and -6 on the output of that guy. Nothing happening with the low pass filter. So we'll listen to that one more time. And after a couple bars of listening to it, I'm going to engage the high pass filter on there and play with the resonance and show you some of the fun creative stuff that you could do if you were to automate something like this. So here we go. One important thing is these high pass and low pass filters on the edges of the interface here. These, I believe I found that they were happening on the output stage. So this is not what's going into the saturation circuit. This is dealing with stuff that's happening post saturation. So you can get some pretty cool filtery sounds out of that. I'm going to do the low pass filter now. Here we go. Now, here's the thing to note is when I bring the mix down and start bringing the dry back in, we're starting to hear some phasey stuff. This is where the phase invert comes in. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to make it sound right, but let's just play around and slide this and see if we can get something that feels more in phase as we're moving that mix knob. I've got that low pass filter down pretty far. I've got a really high resonant peak. That's introducing phase issues. So it's natural that we would have this. Let's just see what we get with the phase invert. Cool. So some crazy stuff. I'm not hearing a lot of change from the phase invert, putting it around what might be the corner frequency. Again, I don't know what the 0, 1, 2, 3 mean on this thing. That should be giving me a frequency readout. So 3 overstayers, if that were to equate to 306 hertz, sure. I thought maybe I was hearing a little something there, but not totally sure, to be completely honest. So yeah, there it is on drums. Let's go down to the mix bus and check it out there. Let's see how we might get some cool stuff. So I'm going to bypass that on the drums. We'll go down to our master. And this mix is very much just a balancing mix. Vance's stuff just comes in, amazing anyway. So he tracks it like it's already been mixed, and it sounds great. So I just did a little bit of moving faders around, and I think I put a plate on the lead vocal and a little bit of the Pulsar 1176 just to control it a little bit, but nothing serious. All right, so let's go over to a chorus. We'll start in bypass, and then we'll just start moving some stuff around and see if we can get something cool out of it. Here we go. Okay, so again, I'm having to really push that input to get it to react to it. So I'm going to take the headroom slider and just bring it down a bit. Here we go. So one thing that you could focus your ear on is the sound of the snare. So we're getting the same effect as compression because we're just lopping off the peaks from that thing, the transient peaks from it. Listen to not just the transient of the snare, but also how the tone of it changes too. We're hitting this thing with about 1 dB of saturation from the meter, if I'm understanding that right. And we're in classic MAS mode. So I'm not using the dual mode, the second mode, any of the filters that are happening pre-saturation. And yeah, so I'll play it in bypass, listen to the snare, and then we'll come out of bypass. So that's something to listen to as we dial this thing in, is how does the snare start to react to it? So I'll start bringing it up and we'll see where we find a cool spot. So right there, I found a cool application for it. If I was doing a mastering thing and I had a problem where, the snare was just like nuclear on the mix, and maybe the band approved this decision and they were just like, hey, like the snare is too loud. And unfortunately, the mixing engineer quit and went to do something where he can make much more money. And also his studio burned down. There was a dinosaur that came through, breathed fire onto his studio, melted our hard drives, and we can't recall the mix to turn the snare down. I'd be like, that's an insane story. You should probably write a book about that story. Luckily, I have the Softube Overstayer, so we'll just try to forget all of my questions about the dinosaurs and we'll just dial this thing in and see if we can bring the snare back. So one more time, listen to the dry without the snare. Pay attention to the snare and the vocal relationship, if the snare is forward versus the vocal. And then as I come out of bypass, listen to what it's doing to the sound. Here we go. Cool. So problem solved, except for the burned down studio. Let's check out some of these other distortion modes here. Here we go. This one's interesting because it's actually bringing a little bit of focus to the center of the image for me. So let me take it out, pay attention to where the sides are, the reverb of the snare and everything. And then when I turn it in, see what happens to the stereo image on it. Here we go. Without sex. So that kind of makes it more focused on the vocal, which is interesting. We're adding second order harmonics to the entire mix. The net effect that I hear on this example is the vocal comes into focus a little bit more. Let's take out second and listen to dual. So it's interesting, like I'm playing between those two modes and I hear less of that effect off of dual than I do off of second. Second starts to feel a little bit cramped, but I'm hearing more of a focus and more of an impact on the actual image than I am necessarily listening for different distortions and all of that. So interesting effect. Not like when you're using something like this, it's not always about listening. Like I'm using a saturation plugin, I need to listen for saturation. It's listen to the whole picture and see what happens when you use each one of these things. I'm going to go over, let's play with some of these filters on the left that feed our saturation circuit. So I'll leave it on dual and emphasis for right now. Here we go. All right, so things start to get crazy with all three of them in. The high shelf on this mix I probably wouldn't do unless I had the extended controls down at the bottom and could tweak some of that around. Now, we're still on the classic MAS preset here, so let me try turning this on, and then let's go over to treble distortion and just see if like saturating just the top end of it kind of has a good effect on what the cymbals are doing. Here we go. We started here. So it was still a little bit too bright with the high shelf and the treble distortion on there to me, so I kind of went back to these settings for it. But you can see that this is probably a very useful plugin. I like the sound of the saturation. Whatever they're doing for their algorithm sounds really good. Kind of makes me want to hear the original box. It seems like this has a lot more flexibility to it, but I do love the simple interface of the regular MAS as opposed to the extended. And basically just know that you're getting different presets on the bottom of it. And then if you want to get tweaky, you've got the extended version. It's pretty cool. Let me know if you guys want to hear this on anything else. Yeah, I think it's a pretty cool box. The turning it on too, I liked how the snare was a little bit more controlled on this blend. Obviously, I could just turn the snare down if I wanted to, but you know, if we had that case of the dinosaur and everything, then we'd be okay because we have an MAS. So yeah, let me know if you guys want to hear it on anything else. I'd also love to hear what you guys would like to see on the next episode of the Plugin Show. If you've got a plugin that you're, you know, wanting to know more about, or something that you've, you know, seen on an ad somewhere that you'd like to see featured on the show, please let me know in the comments. Trying to make this as much of your show as possible, more than just me getting up here and yapping about a plugin. The whole reason for doing it in a live stream is so that you guys can interact and we can make it a community show. So yeah, definitely let me know what plugins you guys would like to see. Other than that, I think that the next step for everybody, if you've made it this far, is to go to softube.com, download a trial and play with it for yourself. Play with it on all different sources, different styles of music. I think that I'm going to end up using this one a lot more. Turns out I had this in my plugin folder and I didn't even really realize it. Because I had a bundle from Softube, and somebody requested it last week or on the last show that we take a look at it. So I went in and I was like, oh, I have it in the folder. That's great. And I think I'm actually going to start using it a lot more because I like what it's doing. I think it's a really flexible thing. I like it on the drum bus and the mix bus primarily. And it's not like an every mix kind of thing, but I think it's very useful, which is cool. Let's see. So Kevin White says, Mark, at the end, would you mind showing on the classic MAS on the analyzer again the difference between all buttons out and then just engaging the emphasis? I think it might have been obscured. Yes, absolutely. Let's do it. So go over to the analyzer here. Okay, so let me make sure you guys can see on your screen here. So here is our analyzer, and then let me see specifically what you wanted to know. Let me make the overstayer a little bit smaller. Make sure you guys can see everything. Okay, so you wanted me to go to the classic MAS. This is the extended. Let's bring up classic guy here. All right, here is our classic guy. We'll bring back our analyzer. Reset the size again. Oh. Okay, there we go. And you said, let's take a look at the difference between all buttons out and then just engaging emphasis. Okay, so that would be this setting here, I believe. Let me go to the factory default, take it out of bypass, and one more time, all buttons out, just engaging emphasis. So here is just engaging emphasis, and I think that we need to push in to a little bit of distortion to kind of get the idea, which I'm going to have to bring down the headroom for. So let me get the bottom panel. Let's bring down the headroom, say 18 dB. Yeah, you can see it kind of going crazy over there. All right. And back off the input. All right, so as we start pushing into saturation, you can see that there's a test signal that the Bertram is sending into the unit. It's fluctuating. It's not a steady source, it looks like. So I don't know that we can trust what we're going to see on the meters. We can look at the curve for sure. One other way to do this would be to feed pink noise into it and then see what we get out of that, which we might do. Because to get I can't even get the saturation to show up here. Okay, so Kevin says, I have the hardware unit, and if I'm using it on for a master or the mix bus, I want to keep the general EQ as flat as possible. I'll start with the emphasis button only and just kiss it to get a bit of punch. To my ears, the emphasis mode is more flat than all buttons out default mode. Assuming that the modeling is true, I want to see if that's perceived or not. So, Kevin, another way to do that would be with this Bertram EQ curve analyzer or something like Plugin Doctor. I actually can put like a hardware insert in between these things. So you could, load up the plugin and you could look at your hardware and the software and see how they react to each other. So, okay, here's all buttons out. Here's emphasis in. And then let me crank up the input a bit. This is with emphasis in. Let me take emphasis out. So it's doing some output compensation. Remember, I brought down the headroom 18 dB here. Let me bring it back up till we get a flat response-ish. And then we'll put emphasis in again. So you're getting a little bit of a low dip on this analyzer from this test signal that it's being fed. All of those variables put in there, right? Yeah, so interesting. If we bring in our other guys, things start to get a lot crazier. So here's emphasis out. I'll leave those two saturations in. And then if I take these out, it's more extreme as I put in the extra saturation there. Again, like I'm not a scientist here, and somebody like Joe Vizzetti or something would probably yell at me if he saw me testing a plugin this way. But yeah, so this is the Bertram EQ curve analyzer. It's feeding, it looks like a pulse signal into a saturation device, and we're reading a curve out of it. Your ears are the best answer to all of this. Mike Ornsby says, could you do UA's Helios Type 69 plugin EQ on a show? That would make a great show, Mike. I love that plugin, both the legacy version and the new Unison version with the preamp modeling on it. Reed Shippen has a video on Puremix where he talks about the legacy version of the Helios, and there's like a sweet spot on that thing where it reacts in a certain way, which is pretty cool. So that might be a really fun one to do. Cool. Kevin, did that answer your question enough? The EQ analyzer, the EQ curve analyzer from Bertom is free. It might be a donation thing, but you could get that and then you could insert your hardware in between, and you could try to look at it that way. Another way that I do this, we'll do this while I'm waiting for some more plugin suggestions for the show, guys. Let me take off the Bertom and we'll do this the way that I used to do it. So I used to take a signal generator and I would output pink noise. Let me bypass the overstayer, and then I'd bring up the Pro MB from FabFilter. This is a moving deal here, but the overstayer is going to react differently to pink noise too, probably. If we bring on the mass, let me make sure you guys can see everything. Here's our Pro MB. Can I just drag this? I can't just drag it, sorry. All right, let's take this out of bypass. We'll leave emphasis out first. So here it is. We're lighting up the signal a little bit. Let me push into this and see if we see a similar thing. Just bringing our output down. And then let's throw emphasis on. So yeah, we're not seeing anything close to what we were seeing with the EQ curve from Bertom. So also, my ear wasn't hearing the same curve as it was from the Bertom. So as always, use your ears. Some of this stuff is not useful at all, right? Some of the analyzing stuff. Awesome. I hope that that helps in some way. Both of these are probably bad ways to look at plugins. Maybe you want to look at Plugin Doctor. Maybe you just want to use your ears. Let me know. Cool. All right. Looks like we might be doing the Helios plugin. Cool. If you want to see that trick from Reed, I think it's the video where there's acoustic guitars in it. I want to say it's a Dierks Bentley video on Puremix. So maybe check that one out. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that this was useful. Go download the plugin, try it out on your stuff. I think I'm actually going to use it quite a bit. So this has been a fun one. All right. Until next time, I'll be back next Monday for another Mix Tank Live. And I hope to see you guys there, 2:30 p.m. Eastern. See ya.